Sure feels like Christmas around here, doesn't it? I want to thank the Bargers and the Bedners and the Michaelises for starting with all the decorations, and I know there's more to come because we have Night of Bethlehem next week, and so there will be more even happening this week leading into that. And so I just want to thank them for all their work as they put things together around here for the Christmas season. A couple years ago, there was a story that was passed to me by our ladies who did a teaching kitchen here in our community. They taught fourth and fifth graders once a week, and about this time of year, they brought a nativity to their meeting, and they asked the students if they knew what this was, and none of them knew what it was. Last year, we decided to enter into the Christmas parade. It's happening this coming Saturday this year. And in doing that, I was dressed as a Roman soldier. And I figured out pretty quickly where our community stands on this because I was mocked. And I was told that this person's favorite part of Christmas is Spartan soldiers. Because they didn't know how the Christmas story, the Nativity, fit into Christmas. I wonder if we actually know what Christmas is about. Our culture gives us lots of things about Christmas. It's like we have this pile of stuff that is our Christmas, right? And we have like different things. You know, maybe we have our Christmas parties. We have those over here. And, you know, here we have our Christmas cards that we all spend a lot of time sending. Over here, you know, we have the baking that has to be done, that's, you know, required for Christmas to be Christmas. Maybe it's the house decorations, and you have to include the inflatables. That's required. Travel to see family, right? I mean, we have to go see our family and spend time with them at Christmas. You know, here we have all the shopping that has to be done. That's a big one that's part of Christmas around here. Parties. Have we talked about Christmas parties yet? Did I do Christmas parties already? I'm losing track of my list. We have to have the right gift for the right people. You can't have the wrong gift. You have to give that a lot of thought. You know, we have to do all the right community events that are happening. And then underneath here somewhere, buried in this pile of cultural Christmas stuff, we have, Jesus. That's somewhere lost in the midst of everything happening in our culture around us that we call Christmas. We've lost Christmas. It's gotten buried down there somewhere. We have all these things that we have culturally defined, but yet aren't really what it is, right? Some of you may be wondering what Christmas is about. That as I've walked through these various things, you've thought, oh yeah, that and this and that. But what's it about? Maybe you're asking questions like, what's that star doing up there? It wasn't there a couple weeks ago. What's its purpose? Why are stars part of Christmas? Maybe you've been asking yourself, there's these barnyard scenes. What are those about? What's that have to do with Christmas? Like, that isn't part of Santa, is it? Or maybe you've heard of these guys called wise men or shepherds, and you think, I don't understand what that has to do with anything. Some of you may be saying, hey, I've heard about this Jesus, and I think Jesus has something to do with Christmas, but how did we get from Jesus to what I see at the mall? Or what I hear on the radio with the Christmas music and whatever else? Like, how did we get from here to there? You know, maybe you're asking some of these questions, or questions similar to it. Maybe you're wondering how all of this matches, why Christmas here looks so much different than Christmas does out there. If that's you or someone you know, we're going to spend the next 4 weeks walking through the Christmas story. I don't want to make any assumptions. I don't want to make any assumptions that we just automatically know what Christmas is about, because I know we don't. That's been clear from what I see around us in our community. My goal is that for anyone who attends church or watches us online for the next 4 weeks will know the Christmas story clearly. I'm not going to do anything fancy over the next few weeks. There's not going to be anything like really super cool and shiny about the next few weeks. We're just going to walk through the Christmas story, because I want us to be certain that we know from Scripture, scene to scene to scene to scene, the Christmas story, so that we know what it's all about. So if you have questions about Christmas, or you know someone who does, this would be a great month to come to church, to invite them to watch online. The Christmas story actually begins long before the birth of Jesus. Several centuries, actually. The origin story of Christmas actually begins back in the book of Genesis. In Genesis chapters 1 and 2, God created. And he created everything exactly as it was supposed to be. And everything worked together exactly as he intended it to be. It was perfect. It was exactly as he wanted it. And in the middle of all that creation was this garden. This special place he created for his special creation, humans. He placed there two humans, one called human, it's Adam, and the other called the woman. Later, she's named Eve. And they were there. They were God's special creation that he had created differently from everything else because they held his image. And they were intended to partner with God in managing creation. To be with him, to walk with him, to trust him, to obey him, to have a unique relationship with God from anything else in all of creation. But in Genesis chapter 3, they chose to rebel. They chose to not trust God, that God was not worthy, that he was holding out on them in some way, and they sinned. And in the midst of all of this, God dealt out some consequences to the man and to the woman, and then to the serpent. And in the midst of these consequences is our first arrow pointing forward to Christmas. In chapter 3, verse 15, God said to the serpent, I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring, and he will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. There will be one coming, one in the future, here, Mr. Serpent, who will crush your head. It's the first hint we have of a coming Messiah, a coming Redeemer, one who will come and defeat evil. From this, we see that there will be a conflict that occurs between this Messiah and the serpent, Satan. The conflict will strike a blow to the Messiah's heel, but the Messiah will ultimately strike the serpent's head and win the battle. This is our first arrow pointing forward to someone coming out in the future still that will fulfill this. As the story continues to unfold, we know that this is the battle between good and evil, the ultimate battle, the final battle. That although the Messiah will die, he will win the battle once and for all on behalf of all humanity, including this fallen Adam and Eve that are hearing this for themselves. I wonder what Adam and Eve were thinking. I wonder what they were hearing and what they were discussing as they were exiled out of the garden as a consequence of their sin. When they thought this was going to happen. Is this going to happen tomorrow and fix this thing we just messed up? I wonder what they thought this was going to look like as they were experiencing sin and brokenness for the first time in their lives. As nothing was today as it was yesterday. What was their expectation of this coming Messiah? The story continues in Genesis 12 when God says to Abram, Go out from your country and your relatives and your father's household to the land that I will show you. Then I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will exemplify divine blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but those who treat you lightly, I must curse them, so that all families of the earth may receive blessing through you. We know this as the Abrahamic covenant. It's a promise of universal blessing, the blessing that the Messiah would bring when he comes, and this would happen through Abraham's family. He's making a promise to Abraham that this plan that was started back in Genesis 3, that Abraham's family will be a part of this, that through his lineage, a great nation, a great name, a great land, his family will exemplify God's blessing on all people. I wonder what Abraham was thinking when he heard this. The excitement he must have had of thinking, here out of the blue, God chose me, that through my family, this Messiah is going to come. I wonder what he was thinking as he thought about his future family. And would this be a son? Would this be a grandson? When, God, will this happen? I'm sure there was an expectation on Abraham's part. As we all know Abraham's story, it didn't quite turn out like I'm sure he hoped it would. But nonetheless, there was this promise and the accompanying expectation and joy that came with it. We go forward into Numbers chapter 24 with the testimony of a man who seemed to be a pagan prophet named Balaam. He said this, he said, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not close at hand. A star will march forth out of Jacob, and a scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the skulls of Moab and the heads of the sons of Sheth. Edom will be a possession. Seir, his enemy, will also be a possession. But Israel will act valiantly. A ruler will be established from Jacob. He will destroy the remains of the city. This is another prophecy of the Messiah, another pointing forward of a star, a scepter, signs of a king that will rise up out of Israel, out of Jacob, out of this family lineage that started with Abraham. A ruler who will be established. Again, there was this promise of a king that would rule on God's behalf. We see the battle aspect of this with good and evil that we saw in Genesis 3. The Messiah would come and be victorious. The promise came on the heels of a 400-year exile in Egypt. So I picture the people hearing this. Some may have lost hope in the Messiah. He must have forgot about us. It's been a while since we've heard from him. Others who maybe hadn't heard the story been passed to them. Their ancestors had forgot to tell them. Others, maybe their hope burned bright. But now here they are wandering in the desert, not exactly sure what's next, and God has reminded them of this promise of the coming Messiah, of a seed of blessing that was to come that should give them hope in the midst of their desert wandering, in the midst of this really difficult situation. Israel eventually, after 40-some years, enters the land that had been promised centuries earlier. And I can imagine their hopes now coming up that, hey, we're now back in the land. Maybe now is when the Messiah will come. Maybe now's the time. But then he didn't. And over time, they took most of the land, not all of it, but most of it. They began to establish their kingdom. First had judges who ruled, which aren't exactly what God promised, but, that's what they did. Soon gave way to their demands for a king. God did promise a king, right? So we're going to demand a king. We don't want that king. That seems like an imagination at this point. We need an earthly king. God gives them an earthly king. First a man named Saul, and then a man named David. Early in David's reign, God makes this promise in 2 Samuel 7. It says, when the time comes for you, David, to die, I will raise up your descendant, one of your own sons, to succeed you. I will establish his kingdom. He will build a house for my name, and I will make his dynasty permanent. That's an important word. I will become his father, and he will become my son. When he sins, I will correct him with the rod of men and wounds inflicted by human beings. But my loyal love will not be removed from him, as I removed it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom, David, will stand before me permanently. Your dynasty will be permanent. This is known as the Davidic covenant. It's a covenant with God made with David, that he would establish the king, the Messiah, would come through his lineage. So now we not just have through Abram's, but through David's as well. This established the expectation of this coming king with a permanent, with an eternal kingdom. Meaning this isn't an earthly king. No earthly king has a permanent dynasty. They all come to an end. But a God king, that would be an eternal kingdom. In one sense, David, being a rather good king, but quite flawed, gave the people a hope, a taste of what an ideal king could be. And yet, on the other hand, his failings were quite public and painful. So who exactly would this king be? Solomon, David's son, it's included here, mentioned, but doesn't sound like it's him. So who would be this descendant of David's, who's a descendant of Abram's, that would be this Messiah, this eternal king of an eternal kingdom? How exciting this must have been for David and for the people to have this promise made, to have it kind of brought back up and re-promised to them, be reminded of him, that God has not forgotten. And this guy you have right here, David, he is just a foretaste, a pointing forward of who I will send. And the Messiah will be known as the Son of David after him and after this promise. The final king whose reign will last forever. During this time, there were many Psalms written, and there are a few more places in Scripture that promise the Messiah more beautifully than the Psalms. Psalm 2 speaks of the Messiah as the one who God will install as his king over Israel and being given nations as his inheritance. Psalm 22 portrays a suffering Messiah, something they had heard, but as we see later, they don't quite have a category for. Psalm 72 describes the reign of a righteous king of Israel, and Psalm 110 shows the installation of the Messiah at the right hand of God. Unfortunately, Israel didn't listen real well, and they didn't remain united very long. Divisions and compromises and deals with foreign kings forced the country into civil war. The travails of war, being partially conquered little by little and giving away land little by little through these deals, certainly brought the question of the Messiah up for discussion again, as hope dwindled. What is God up to? Why is this happening? Why didn't he bring back this king, this descendant? Why would God allow this? When exactly is this promised Messiah going to come and fix this mess? I wondered. The prophets anticipated the Messiah too, preparing the way for the Lord, speaking the Messiah still to come. Isaiah was one of the first to do this. He indicts Judah for all her sin and then turns to a message of hope, reminding them that in the midst of the injustices and the violence and the oppression that they were conducting, there was still the promise of the Messiah, whom will still be sent and will deliver his people. This king they had never experienced, that they had always hoped for, would indeed still be coming and restore them. Isaiah's writing is particularly rich in these messianic prophecies pointing forward. The king of Israel and the king of Syria had formed an alliance God did not approve of, and it led to Jerusalem being attacked. And in the midst of this, Isaiah assured the king of Israel that the Syrians would not prevail. Isaiah said in chapter 7, "For this reason, the Lord himself will give you a confirming sign." This is the sign that they won't prevail. "Look, this virgin is about to conceive and give birth to a son. You, young woman, will name him Emmanuel." We get these details about a virgin giving birth to this son, this Messiah, the pointing forward. This supernatural conception is a sign to the people, a reminder, a confirmation that God has not forgotten. And this is how you're going to know which one is the Messiah. So you can have hope, understanding that God has not forgotten, even naming the child that God is with you. This isn't anybody else, this is God with you. In Isaiah 9, he says, "A child has been born to us, a son has been given. He shoulders responsibility and is called Wonderful Advisor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His dominion will be vast, and he will bring immeasurable prosperity. And he will rule on David's throne and over David's kingdom." This sounds familiar. "Establishing it and strengthening it by promoting justice and fairness," everything they weren't, "from this time forward and forevermore." That sounds eternal. "The zeal of the Lord's heaven's armies will accomplish this." A beautiful reminder of this Messiah, this one who will be sent, more description of who he will be, not an ordinary person. Virgin-born Savior, God incarnate. This God-man will sit on David's throne, will establish his kingdom. It will be eternal. It will be one of justice and righteousness. Think about how the people would have pondered this promise in the midst of their eroding, falling apart, divided kingdom. The hope they would have gotten from this. This child born, this Messiah that will be sent as a human yet fully God, who will be a leader, not just any leader, have ultimate authority, an extraordinary strategist, a wonderful counselor, a mighty warrior God, protective father, a prince who would establish ultimate peace, with vast dominion and authority, whose prosperity would have no end. Can you imagine the hope this would give in the midst of that setting, of a country just falling apart, little by little, by little, by little, by little? In Isaiah 11, he says, "A shoot will grow out of Jesse's stump, a bud that will sprout from his roots." You picture a tree that's been cut off, and yet out of the midst of a cut off tree, here comes a sprout with buds of new life. The Lord's Spirit will rest on him, a spirit that gives extraordinary wisdom, a spirit that provides the ability to execute plans, and a spirit that provides absolute loyalty to the Lord. The Spirit of God. This Messiah will have the Spirit of God in a way no one else has, to set them apart in yet another way. As this continued to erode, as Isaiah continues to write, he has numerous other prophecies of the Messiah. I continue to think about the people as the northern kingdom fell, as they continue to have corrupt leader after corrupt leader, a good one pop up here and there, but just everything's fallen apart. How much hope there would have been in these words that were pointing forward. And then the unthinkable happens and the whole country falls. We all get taken into exile. Everyone gets taken as a captive, hauled off to some other country. Where's the hope now? How they would have clung to these verses, clung to these promises over and over throughout what we call our Old Testament, what they would have had in these writings. And even in the darkness of the times, I would have said, maybe God hasn't forgotten. Maybe God is still at work. In Micah chapter 5, as he writes towards the end of this period of time, he says, "As for you, Bethlehem, seemingly insignificant among the clans of Judah, from you a king will emerge who will rule over Israel on my behalf, one whose origins are in the distant past." It's like in the midst of this complete darkness, there's just this little glimmer of light shining through. Hey, little Bethlehem, this little insignificant town that nobody important comes from you, I haven't forgotten. There will be a king. This king I've promised from the distant past, I have not forgotten. He's still to come. From you, Bethlehem, is where he'll be born. God promised Israel's restoration, this place that doesn't even exist at the moment, saying there's still hope. There's still hope. I still promise this coming Messiah. We go into what we call the intertestamental period, which is the time between the Old Testament and the New Testament. We hear nothing from God. We have no record of what he is up to and what the Jewish people are hearing from him. We know there's been one country taking over another, and they've been handed over from the rule of one to this other, and now they're under Rome. Persecution, the unpredictability, what exactly Israel looks like today versus then, political turmoil, social turmoil, all these foreign dominations happening, these foreign cultures coming in, like the Greek culture and then the Roman cultures. And where does Israel stand in all this? Where is the hope of the people? Is it gone? Is there any expectation left in all these differing views in the midst of the chaos? There was. There was still very much a hope alive that God would send this Messiah that was promised. That there was still hope that he had promised and he had promised and he had promised and he had promised. And when God promises, he's going to come through. And he hasn't yet. And we don't understand how he's going to make it happen. But there is hope. There is expectation of the Messiah coming. And all of this leads us to the opening lines of the book of Luke. When Luke writes, "Now many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us." Like the accounts passed on to us by those who were eyewitnesses and servants of the word from the beginning. And so it seemed good to me as well, because I have followed all things carefully from the beginning, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know for certain things you were taught. See, he's making an account, the things that have happened long ago that now have been fulfilled. That he wants to have a complete and orderly accounting of all of this that had happened that built up towards this and has now been fulfilled in Jesus and the birth of the Messiah. He says, I want you to be certain that you know these things. And this, of course, is the introduction to his gospel account of Jesus. And if you keep reading, he jumps right into what we know of as the Christmas story, doesn't he? See, Luke wants us to be certain that as we look back across the Old Testament, many of the Jews missed Jesus and his fulfillment, that he was, in fact, the promised Messiah. He wants to make sure we don't miss it. That from Genesis 3 on, there was the promise of a coming Messiah, and that he had, in fact, come. As people for thousands of years had pondered these promises, had wondered when and how and who and all these different things through all the circumstances, that he had come. The Messiah has come. They had longed for his arrival, and many had missed it, and he wanted to make sure we didn't. We do much of the same with Jesus' second coming. We know that he has come once and has now promised to come again. And now as history continues to pass, as events ebb and flow, we too wonder and long for his return the second time, to bring it all to its conclusion. Good things happen, and we think perhaps this is it. Or good things happen and we forget about the promise altogether because they're good enough we don't need to worry about it. Or bad things happen and we think, surely this is when God's going to fix it all, right? Or bad things happen and we think, he can't come in the middle of this mess. The right leader's elected and we have this sigh of relief, or the wrong leader's elected and we think, man, God won't stand for this too much longer, will he? Natural disasters occur, a series of them maybe. Some political events, some world turmoil of some kind, and we think, man, these must be signs of it's imminently happening. This must be it. We hear the horrors of injustice, like I shared a little bit ago, and we think, God surely won't come till we get this figured out, will he? See, in the same way we long for his second coming, they longed for his first. In the same way that we ride the roller coaster of expectancy, some days are up and some days are down. Some days we hit the spin and we get turned upside down. They did too. For thousands of years, they longed and they anticipated and they expected that maybe today's the day. Whether things were high or things were low, maybe today's the day. I want to be really clear. Christmas, of all this stuff that our culture has made Christmas about, it is 100% about the coming of the promised Messiah. It's not mostly about that. It is 100% about that. All these other things that we have added on top, they're good, they're fine, they're fun. But what Christmas is really about is the birth of the Messiah, the one who had been promised long before, the one who Israel had hoped for centuries leading up to. Christmas is the fulfillment of dozens and dozens and dozens of promises for thousands of years. The rescue of humanity from sin, bringing all of creation back into relationship with God. On one hand, Christmas was a complete surprise because nobody knew when and how exactly. On the other hand, there was no surprise about it. God had promised it and promised it and promised it. The origin story of Christmas, the real Christmas story, is important for us to know because our culture is telling us all kinds of stories. Unless we know the real story, we don't know one from the other. As fun as the parties and the cards, the inflatables, the shopping, the candy, all that is, without the real story, it's all just empty. It's all temporary. For thousands of years, people knew that they lived in a broken world that needed fixed. They were very honest about the brokenness around them. They knew that their own brokenness needed transformed. They saw the reminders all the time. They knew that they were not capable, and no one in that world, nothing in their world was capable of fixing what they knew was broken. And one of Satan's greatest lies is that he has convinced our world they don't need fixed. That there's nothing to be transformed. Nothing to be rescued from. And our world keeps digging through this pile of gifts and stuff, looking for the fix, the fulfillment. And it doesn't work, does it? there's no expectation of a Messiah because they don't sense that need. We've forgotten. We've forgotten to tell and pass on the hope of Jesus. But the fact of the matter is, Jesus has come. The Messiah has come. And when we celebrate Christmas, more than just happy stuff, we're celebrating the birth of the Messiah. We're celebrating God's generosity, his glorious and gracious act of love for us by sending the Messiah to rescue us. We've substituted so many other things in. We've forgotten the story. We've piled so much stuff on top. We've forgotten what's at the bottom. We need to know the Christmas story. It needs to start in our homes. It needs to start in our lives. If you are not clear on Christmas, why should anyone around you be clear? How can you tell anybody else? How can you help anyone else have hope in Jesus if you are not clear yourself? This is Family Sunday, and so I want to ask you a family question. How are you passing Christmas down? If all you pass down is grandma's cookies, or this, we always open one gift, Christmas Eve. If that's all you're passing down, what have you really passed down? How is it that you are passing Christmas down? Whatever your role is, whether it's parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, what is your role in passing Christmas down? Discipling others, particularly your family, in the real meaning of Christmas. I don't mind if you do the other cultural stuff, as long as the story isn't missed, as long as the truth isn't covered up by all the other stuff, and it isn't this afterthought that we just throw in because we feel like we probably should. What's it really about? I want to help us with just some ideas, because maybe you're sitting there thinking, I get it, Jeff, but I'm not sure what to do. Christmas is probably the easiest season we have throughout the year to pass the faith, to tell the Christmas story, to tell about Jesus. It just lends itself really well to it. There's about 1.5 million Christmas devotions. You can pick one. And don't worry if it's the perfect one, because you're going to get another chance to try another one next year. It happens every year. So pick one. Pick one that fits this year. Don't make it too idealistic. Like, we don't need 15 devotions every day for all 24 days leading up to Christmas. What if it's 2 a week? Start there. Maybe 1 a day is fine. Maybe just start with something. There's lots of books, there's lots of studies out there. I'm sure there are apps like the Bible app that have some on there that you could use. Right Now Media has some. There are lots of places you can go to find Christmas devotions. They're all over the place. What about some fun activities that aren't just fun for the sake of fun, but they're fun for the sake of teaching the gospel and the story of Jesus? Do something fun. Find some creative ways. Do some research to say, what can we do that would be really cool, that would engage the family? Maybe some crafts. You could build something. Daily readings of some kind. You could walk through the book of Luke. It's interesting, the book of Luke has 24 chapters. So you can read 1 chapter a day for the first 24 days of December. Lead you right up to Christmas. Right? That's kind of handy. There's Advent calendars, Advent candles, and devotions that go with it. You could do that for your family. You can make a point to read the Christmas story. I'm going to walk you through it over the next 4 weeks. You could take and maybe in the days leading up, or here as I'm teaching through it, you can go home and say, okay, now I can take his sermon and break it up into a couple days worth of readings. Read through the Christmas story. Deborah's family had the tradition when she grew up of reading the Christmas story at Christmas dinner before anybody ate. That was a great idea, except the food got cold. Still a good one. Like, if I got to choose between Jesus and hot food, or I'm sorry, Jesus and cold food, or no Jesus and hot food, I'm taking Jesus. Maybe you do it some other time. We try to do it before we open presents. There's nothing opened until we read through the Christmas story. How is it that you can do that you can pass that on? Come to the night in Bethlehem next Sunday. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be interactive. Going to have things that give you, that build the Christmas story as you walk through the town. And now you have a tool right there to go home and talk again about Christmas. And again about Christmas. A great tool. Maybe you have a nativity. Maybe you don't and you need to get one. Maybe you can use this as a visual as you walk through the story to, some of them, like these are all attached together. Some of them are separate pieces and you can help kind of move the pieces around and understand the story in an interactive kind of way. There's lots of Christmas movies, but find one that actually tells the story. There's a movie called The Star, another one, The Nativity Story. Both do a pretty good job of telling the Christmas story. Maybe you're a family that likes to sing. Well, find some Christmas songs that sing of Christmas and sing them and then talk about them. What does O Silent Night mean? What is joy to the world actually proclaiming, right? Find creative ways with your family to teach them of Christmas. Remind them often. As you're saying, hey, let's get together and buy a gift for this person. Why is it that we buy gifts? What's the purpose? What is this a reflection of? Not just gift giving, right? But the gift of Jesus. Like use teachable moments all throughout the season. Maybe there are some things you need to change about how you do Christmas. You need to shift the emphases to other things. And instead of buying everybody 15 gifts, maybe 2 is adequate so that we can shift the focus to where it needs to be. Right? I don't know. Who knows what? I'm just throwing out some ideas, right? But it all starts with you. What is it that you can do now that you know the Christmas story, or will over the next few weeks, to then disciple and pass on the Christmas story to your family? I want to encourage you, don't let this season pass without doing this. Be intentional when you're home about what Christmas looks like. Today we saw that Christmas was no surprise, that it had been expected, even though it was surprising. It had been promised for centuries earlier. Next week we're going to start of more of what we know the Christmas story, the events that began to unfold in the months leading up to the birth of Jesus. That's where we're going to go next week. So I hope you'll join us for that. Let's pray. Father, you promised a Messiah. And God, we can trust you. We can have confidence in you that when you promise, when you point forward, you're going to come through. So, Father, thank you for being a God who's trustworthy. And that now, as we sit here and we know Jesus has come, that we can have confidence in his second coming, in equally as surprising and unsurprising way. But God, that in the meantime, we would be faithful to you because you have proven to be faithful. We would in this season make it all about Jesus. No matter what our role and place in his life, we would be certain that we remember this is about the birth of Jesus, not about whatever else. So God, give us creativity, give us awareness, give us intentionality, give us the thoughtfulness that as things happen here over the coming few weeks, we would use those as opportunities to praise you and to remind ourselves and one another about Jesus. So Father, I pray that in this season, there would be a revival, there would be a coming of hope, a rediscovering of what Christmas is, so that here in our community, people all over and everywhere would worship you and not just worship the cultural stuff. So God, thanks for this opportunity you give us each year. And I ask this in Jesus' name.